is Chase, or Chase.the.Feeling, and I am a musician. I play like 10 instruments, a songwriter, and a music teacher. I've been teaching private lessons for piano, guitar, and other instruments for about 2 years now, and I like to think that I'm pretty good at it. So I'm just gonna give a rundown of kind of what the first half hour or hour of a guitar lesson would look like. I teach guitar by first teaching the fretboard and teaching the notes, because I don't want to just tell you what to play. I want you to understand why you're playing it, because it's a lot easier to remember that this is a C major chord if you know that a C major chord has a C, E, and G, and this is a C, this is an E, G, C, E. It's easier if you know the theory, because it's like you have the language to speak it. Starting with the strings, the lowest string is E, the next one is A, the next one is D, then G, B, and another E. So E, A, D, G, B, E. The way you can remember this is Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Every amateur does get better eventually, or every acid dealer gets busted eventually. And if you're playing bass guitar, pretty much everything I'm gonna say also applies, just forget these strings exist. So if you're playing bass guitar, it's E, A, D, G, Eddie ate dynamite. Good. And so how the guitar works is, we have the strings, and it makes a noise, but then when we press down on the frets, we're effectively making the string shorter, which makes the note higher. Yeah, these lines are the frets, and you don't want to play actually on the fret like this, but you want to play in between the frets. So this space here is the first fret, this is the second fret, this is the third fret, fourth fret, and fifth fret. And so each fret on the guitar is equivalent to a half step. If you play piano, this will probably make sense, or if you play other instruments, but if you don't play any instruments, you're like, half step, what are you talking about? And normally I would use a keyboard app on my phone to show the keyboard, but some guy is using my phone to record a video or something, so I can't do that. So I have my accordion. So this is an E. And then right next to it is an F. G, A, B, C, D, E. The musical alphabet only goes A through G. There is no H, there is no I. These notes are called sharps. So this is an F, this is an F sharp. This is a G, this is a G sharp. Yeah, so I'm just gonna explain it on guitar. So when we play the first fret of the E string, we go up a half step. That is like going from here to here, from this E to this F. So the first fret of E is F. Then the second fret is like going from this F to this note right next to it, which is the F sharp. So second fret is an F sharp. You get the pattern, and if you don't, you can just watch back. E, F, F sharp, and then the next note is a G. The fourth fret is going to be a G sharp. And then the fifth fret is an A. That's when we move on to the next string, because this A here is the same A as the A string. You can memorize the fretboard down here too, but as far as chords go, I really just teach up to the fifth fret in the beginning. So yeah, so now we're on A, and if we play open A, that's an A. If we play first fret of A, what do we think that is? It's an A sharp. Second fret of A is a B. Then what do we think the third fret is? If you said B sharp, you are wrong, you are stupid, and I hate you, because it's a C. A lot of people, they'll get confused. E and B are the only notes that don't have sharps. I mean, they do have sharps sometimes, but that's in like a weird key like F sharp major. If you see the E, there's no black key in between E and F, so you just go straight from E to F. And then this is the B, there's no black key between B and C, so you just go straight from B to C. So there's no E sharp, no B sharp, but for everything else, it will go letter, letter sharp, and then another letter. Okay, so we have C, and what do we think comes after C? C sharp. All right, and then after C, we have D. And so now we move on to this next string, because this D is the same as the open D. And then the first fret of D is going to be a D sharp. Second fret of D is an E. Now that we've done all of this, we have a complete octave of notes. So it should be a bit easier to guess which note comes next, because if you're like, what comes after E? Well, you can just look back here. You know, this is E, and the first fret of E is F. So the third fret of D is F. What's fourth fret of D? It's an F sharp. All right, and then fifth fret of D is a G. Now we move on to G, because again, this fifth fret is the same as the open G. So we have G, and what do we think is the first fret of G? G sharp. Then the second fret is going to be an A. Then the third fret is going to be an A sharp. And then the fourth fret is a B. And then what's the fifth fret? If you said C, good job, high five, pat on the back. If you said B sharp, we went through this already. The G and B, they kind of break pattern, because for all the other ones, it's been the fifth fret that goes to the next string, but here it's on the fourth fret that's the same as the next string. All right, so what is the first fret of B? It is a C. Second fret of B, C sharp. Third fret of B, D. And D sharp and E. We're at the E again, and this E is the same, it's the same letters as this, but just 2 octaves up. So E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. I said the word octave a couple times, and you are forgiven if you don't know what that is. So an octave is basically the distance between 2 of the same note. I'll use my accordion again. So between this E here and this E here, that's an octave. This low E, and then this E on the second fret of D, that's an octave. And then from this middle E to the high E string, that's another octave. So that's what octaves are. Now that we know what the fretboard is and what notes these are, we can now start making chords. You should probably write this down. It doesn't look the best, it could look better, but you can also find one online that will look better. So what we do to make chords is, once we know what notes are in the chord, then we figure out how we can play them. So the first chord we'll do is an E minor. That is the easiest chord. And an E minor has an E, a G, and a B. Those are the notes in the E minor chord. So now what we do is we look here and we figure out, how can I make those notes? So on the E string, easy, we already have an E. Then on the A string, how can we make an E, G, or B? We can play the second fret. We can play a B on the second fret of the A string. All right, on the D string, how can we play an E, G, or B? We can play the E on the second fret of the D string. So already we have E, B, and another E. For the G, B, and E strings, we don't need to do anything because they're already in the chord. So E minor is like the easiest chord, except for E minor 7 add 11. That one is like objectively easier, but this is just an E minor. It's pretty easy. Important as you're playing these notes, when you put a finger down, a lot of times you'll kind of bend your finger over. And so sometimes your finger can mute the string next to it. So you want to make sure that you're coming straight down onto the string instead of like sideways. Because now with my hand coming straight down, you can actually hear the G. So make sure you don't mute. Yes, you will have to press down hard to make the note actually sound good. Yes, it will hurt. That's kind of just part of the game. That's kind of just how it goes. So that's the E minor. What about an E major? Where's my, yeah. Why do I set it down next to me? It literally has a magnet to go to the whiteboard. An E major has an E, a G sharp, and a B. So where can we play G sharp? Play it on the first fret of G. So how you'll play it is you'll take your pointer finger. I usually call it an index finger, but when I'm teaching, I call it a pointer finger because most of my students are 9 and they say pointer finger. You'll take your pointer finger and put it on the first fret of G. So right here in between like this beginning and the actual first fret. Remember, you don't want to put it on the fret, but you want to put it in between. All right, and then you'll take your middle finger and put it on the second fret of A, and then your ring finger on the second fret of D. And that's how you play E major. And if you want to make it an E minor, you just lift up your pointer finger. The next chord we're going to learn is an A minor. An A minor has an A, a C, and an E. We are actually not going to do anything on the E string because we want the lowest note to be kind of the root of the chord. And so if we're playing an A minor, the root of the chord is the A. So while E is still in the chord, if we play an A minor with that low E, like you're gonna hear that low E, and it's kind of gonna muddy the chord. You wanna start on the A. So A, you're gonna play that open. Then on the D string, how can we make an A, C, or E? We can play the second fret of D. On the G string, how can we make an A, C, or E? Play the second fret. And then on the B string, we can play the first fret. To play the A minor, you'll put your pointer finger on the first fret of B to play the C. You'll put your middle finger on the second fret of D to play an E, and you'll put your ring finger on the second fret of G to play an A. And then you'll strum the bottom 5 strings, being careful not to include this low E. You may notice that this is the same chord shape as E major. So it's pretty easy to switch between them. I don't know, you just go from here and then you move it over a string. I'll be erasing the chords every time, but you can write it down. In fact, I think you should take notes. The A major is going to have an A, a C sharp, and an E. We don't need to change anything about these 4 strings because A, E, A, E. But on the B string, what are we going to do? We're going to play the C sharp on the second fret. If you have bigger hands, this might be harder for you, but the A chord is where like tiny hands prevail. You'll take your fingers and you'll just put them all on the second fret, except the pinky. Pointer finger goes on the second fret of D, middle finger goes on the second fret of G, and ring finger goes on the second fret of B. And for most of these chords, there are multiple ways that you can play them. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3, which is 1, 2, 3, pointer, middle, ring. But you can do 2, 3, 4. You could use your middle ring and pinky to play the notes. And that would make it easier to go to the E major, because then you just move your middle and ring finger over so that they're on the A and D strings instead of D and G, and then you put your pointer finger down on the first fret of the G string. All right, next chord. We're gonna learn a D minor. So a D minor has a D, F, and A. We're gonna start on the D string because the D is the root of the chord, so we want that to be the lowest note. While A is still technically in the chord, we don't want to play that low A, and we definitely don't want to play the E because E's not in the chord. She doesn't even go here. We'll leave these out. We'll play the open D, and then on the G string, how can we make a D, F, or A? We can play the A on the second fret. B string, how can we make a D, F, or A? We play the third fret. And then on the E string, play an F on the first fret. You'll take your pointer finger and put it on the first fret of E to play the F. Your middle finger goes over to play the second fret of G to play an A. And then either your ring finger or your pinky can play the third fret of B to make a D. And then you play the bottom 4 strings. So now that we've played the D minor, what do you think we changed to make a D major? An E minor was E, G, B. E major was E, G sharp, B. A minor was A, C, E. A major was A, C sharp, E. What do you think we changed? We make the F sharp. My marker cap fell into the trash. D, A, D, dad. It stays the same, but instead of playing this first fret On the E string, we will play the second fret, so we play the F sharp. So how we'll play this is pointer finger goes on the second fret of G, middle finger goes on the second fret of E, and ring finger goes on the third fret of B. That's how you play 6 chords. And if you want to go back and forth between them, a good song to work on is Happy Birthday. That's going to be A, E, E, A, D, A, E, A. And when I write the letters as just as the letters, that means it's a major chord. If you just see like an A as a chord, that's a major. If you see A with a little M, that's a minor. You can go A, E, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Mr. President, happy birthday to you. And with chord transitions, sometimes it can be hard to think of like, how do I get from point A to point B? Or more accurately, how do I get from point A to point E? And it can feel like, okay, I need to lift up my whole hand and just recenter it. But I like to think of your left hand as like a small marching band. And the marching band, it makes images with the people moving around. They don't just, teleport to their new places. Each person moves so that they're in a new formation. So I think it's helpful to specifically think about what each finger is doing. So if you're going from the A major chord, which is here, here, and here, open A and E. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? Heck yeah. I wrote 1, 2, and 3 because pointer, middle ring. Sometimes my brain and my mouth are not on the same page. Sometimes they're not even reading the same book. From this A to the E major, your pointer finger is going to move to the first fret of G. Your middle finger is going to move to the second fret of A, and your ring finger is going to move to the second fret of D. So by using your first chord as like a starting point, just think about what your fingers need to do. Okay, pointer goes to the first fret of G, middle goes to the second fret of A, and ring finger goes to the second fret of D. You can do that for pretty much all of the chord transitions. Go away. Going from A major to D major is pretty easy. You just move your pointer finger from the second fret of D to the second fret of G. You move your ring finger. Did I say ring finger? I meant middle finger. From the second fret of G to the second fret of E, and you move your ring finger down to the third fret of B. Your pointer and your middle finger, they stay in the same fret. They just move over 1 or 2 strings. Your pointer finger just moves over 1 string, and your middle finger moves over 2 strings, and then your ring finger stays in the same fret. No, it stays on the same string, but it just goes down 1. Yeah, and then when I'm talking about directions, if I'm saying down, it's moving this way. If I say up, it's moving this way, down, up, and then over just means you're going to a different string. That's transitions made easy. So we learned E minor, E major, A minor, A major, D minor, and D major, and now we're gonna learn 2 more. You may have noticed there's kind of a pattern with the notes that are in the chords. If we write the musical alphabet out, why does the cap keep coming off? I have a tea bag in my trash can. It's moist in there. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And just start over again. A, B, C, D, E. The E minor had an E, G, and B. So we went from the E, we skipped over the F into the G. And then from the G, we skipped the A and went to the B. Then for the A minor, we had A, C, E. So we skipped the B and skipped the D. You take your starting point and you skip a letter and then you skip another letter from there. So D, F, A, D, skip the E, F, skip the G, A. And even the major versions of those chords, it still follows the same rule. It's just an F sharp instead of an F. but the same rule applies where like alphabetically you skip a letter. So what notes do we think are in the C major? We start on C, and then we skip a letter to E, we skip a letter and land on G. So a C major is C, E, G. And C major is all naturals. Naturals are just like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C sharp, D sharp. Those are your sharps. Those are your accidentals. A, D, and E, you need a sharp to make the major chord, but for C, it doesn't need a sharp to make the major chord. So how do we play a C major? We're not going to use the E string because we want our lowest note to be a C, and I kind of gave it away because I said we want our lowest note to be a C, but what can we play on the A string that happens to be a C? We can play a C on the 3rd fret. What can we play on the D string? We can play an E. On the G string, we don't need to do anything because it's already a G. B string, we can play a C. And then on the high E, we don't need to do anything. For the C major chord, pointer finger will play the 1st fret of B, middle finger will play the 2nd fret of D, and ring finger will play the 3rd fret of A. And then you strum these 5 strings, trying not to play the E string. And I'm not going to tell you how to play a C minor chord right now because it's hard. It involves a bar chord, which is where you basically press down on like all or most of the strings with one finger, and they're not fun. I've been playing guitar for 10 years and they're still not fun. And for beginners, they're especially not fun. Next chord on the chopping block is the G major. So if we start at G and we skip a letter, what's the 2nd letter of the chord? B. We skip another letter, we're at D. So a G major has a G, B, and D. So how can we make this chord? I've been recording for 36 minutes. My energy is like, oh. It's funny, like I can teach private lessons about this like all day long, but then you put me in front of the camera and I'm like, this tea is so good. It's the English Rose by Private Selections. Okay, so on the E string, how can we make A, G, B, or D? We can play the 3rd fret of E. On the A string, G, B, or D, we play a B. On the D string, we don't need to do anything because it's already a D. On the G string, same. On the B string, same. And then on the E string, we can do the same thing that we did for the E string here and play the 3rd fret. Okay, so to play the G major, you'll put your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of A to play the B. Put your middle finger on the 3rd fret of E, and then your ring finger goes on the 3rd fret of the high E, and then you play them all together. All together now! And that's the G major. Another way that you can play it is putting your middle finger on the A string, your ring finger on the low E, and your pinky on the high E. This is a bit more difficult, but it's a bit easier to get to if you're playing the C major chord. So this is the C major chord. I have my pointer finger here and then middle and ring here. So middle is on the 2nd fret of D, ring is on the 3rd fret of A. But if I want to go to the G pretty quickly, then I just move my middle finger over so that it's on the A string instead of the D string, and I move my ring finger over so that it's on the E string instead of the A string, and then I put my pinky down and lift up my pointer finger. And you can do it this way, but it's just a bit harder. So if you can play that 2nd version of G, it might be a bit easier. And if you're going from a G to a D, if you start out playing the 1, 2, 3 G major, your middle finger can go over to play, like it moves, middle finger moves a lot. It goes from the 3rd fret of the low E to the 2nd fret of the high E. Move your pointer finger over 2 frets, so it's on the 2nd fret of G. And then ring finger moves over 1 string to play the 3rd fret of B. Alright, so now that we've played some chords and we can move between the chords, you know, I guess it's time to learn some songs. First of which is the one I was just playing, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty. Maybe this isn't the best example because the chords are like, they're not the typical just like major or minor chord. You'll start with a D, and then you'll play what's called a D sus4 by putting your pinky down on the 3rd fret of E, and without looking at the board, what note is on the 3rd fret of E? Okay, you may look. It's a G. Instead of playing D, F sharp A, we're playing D, G, A. We call it a sus chord. That's short for suspended because it's not on like the major third. Because yeah, if you look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. D is the 1st, F sharp is the 3rd, A is the 5th. That's how we refer to chords. And so G is the 4th. So we call it a D sus4 because it's suspended on the 4th. Extra fun fact, if you want to play a D sus2, just lift up your middle and pinky finger, and now you're playing D, E, A. It's in the game. And so that's a D sus2. I love getting sidetracked. We go from a D to a D sus4 to an A7 sus4. Totally easy chords, not complicated at all. This is actually easier to play than A major. We call it an A7 because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're gonna play the G in there somewhere. And then it's sus4. So instead of playing a C sharp, we're gonna play a D. And so that's gonna be you playing the open A, 2nd fret of D, open G, 3rd fret of B, and then open E. So pretty easy chord. It's just like this. So like pointer goes on the 2nd fret of D, and your ring finger can go on the 3rd fret of B. So from D major to D sus, you just put your pinky down, and then going back, you just lift your pinky up. But then to go from the D to that A chord, you lift up your middle finger. You don't use it, and you'll move your pointer finger over from the G string to the D string. Your ring finger stays where it is. So, pretty easy song. It has like some weird chords for a beginner, but it's not that bad. You probably know Zombie by the Cranberries. Another head hangs slowly, child is slowly taken. So that chord progression is E minor, C, G, D. So E minor, that's gonna be open E, 2nd fret of A, 2nd fret of D, and then open, open, open. We use this 0, also kind of looks like an O to just say open string. The 2 means the 2nd fret, and they're just in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. E, A, D, G, B, E. C major, no E string, 3rd fret of A, 2nd fret of D, open G, open 1st fret of B, and open high E, G string, 3, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3. And D is gonna be no E or A, 0, 2, 3, 2. I'm writing kind of sideways, so I don't look the best, but ignore it. And then you play that chord progression the entire time, mostly. So you can start on the E minor, pointer on the 2nd fret of A, making a B, and middle on the 2nd fret of D, making an E. So that's your E minor. And then to go to the C major, your middle finger stays where it is. It stays on the 2nd fret of D, but your pointer finger is going to move over to the the first fret to the first fret of B to play the C, and then your ring finger goes to the third fret of A to play the C. So E minor, C. From the C major to the G major, again, we can take this 3-2 in our middle and ring finger and just move them over. So middle finger just moves over from the D string to the A string. Ring finger just goes from the A string to the E string. So boom, boom. And then our pinky, which is like conveniently curled over here, just comes down on the high E string. And then from there, we go to D major. Middle finger goes from the second fret of the A string to the second fret of E. Pointer finger comes back and plays the second fret of G. And ring finger plays the third fret of B. And then to go from the D major to the E minor, our pointer finger is just going to move back to the second fret of A, and then middle finger goes from the second fret of E to the second fret of D. And, you know, since this is a video, you can rewatch it as many times, and you can pause it, and you can look back over anything. And these chord transitions, like, they're gonna be hard, but you just gotta work on them. Like, you gotta be bad before you can be good. The only way to get better is to practice. There's no Ozempic for music. Yeah, and then as you're playing these chords, like when you're playing the E minor, be careful that your middle finger isn't muting the G string. Make sure that your middle finger is like coming down directly on the D string so that you can still hear that D. For the C major, you know, be wary that your ring finger isn't muting the D string, or that your middle finger isn't muting the E string. A lot of people, they'll end up, their pointer finger mutes this high E, so be very careful about that. Yeah, just be careful about muting. Well, looks like we have time for a scale. Die, 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 die. I guess we'll start with the E major scale. Scales are important because they can help you work with quick finger movement, and a lot of guitar solos that you play are like based off the scale or based off the pentatonic scale. So it's just good to practice playing those single notes. We do scales with what is called tab writing. I'm gonna get a different color. Red. Boom, boom, boom. No. This is what it looks like when you use 100% of your brain. Can you see that? Can you see that? It looks like you can't see that. I'm gonna bring it in. Okay, you can see that. You can see that. Where the heliante is the marker cap? Screw it, I'm gonna use purple. That's easier to see. Okay, that's a bit more readable. Red marker cap, you shall be missed. This is tab. There are 6 lines, one for each of the strings. So this bottom line represents the E string. The next line is the A string. Next line is the D string. The next line is the G string, B, and then the high E. Yeah, that doesn't look super clear, but you know. So how we read tab is I'll put a number on the string where you're supposed to play it. So if I put a 0 on the E string, that means you play the open E. If I put a 2, that means you play the second fret of E. If I put a 4, you play the 4th string. Here we go down the road. Now I'm gonna put a 0 on the A string. What do you think that means? We play the open A. And then a 2 on the A string. We play the second fret of the A string. And a 4, 4th fret of A string. And then we're gonna put a 1 on the D string. That means you play the 1st fret. And then 2. This is the E major scale. So I would say like open, pointer, ring, open, pointer, and then use your pinky to play the 4th fret of the A string, because you'll want to use your pointer to play the D string, and it's a lot easier to go like from pinky to pointer up here than like ring, pointer. But whatever you do, don't use the same finger for every note. Don't do this. You will break my heart. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. Oh no, my lines. Okay, one more scale. We are gonna learn the G major scale. So starting on G, that's the 3rd fret of the E string, so I'm gonna put a 3 there. Then we play an A, the open A. Then we play a B. You can't see where I'm pointing. Then we play a B, 2nd fret of A string. Then we play a C, 3rd. Then we play a D, so open D, an E, 2nd fret, an F sharp, 4th fret, and we play open G. So there's 3 on the line for E. That means you play it on the 3rd fret of E, so on and so forth. Yeah, so you can really use pointer finger for anything in the 2nd fret, middle for anything in the 3rd, and then ring for anything in the 4th. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So those are some of the scales. Those are some chords. My best advice for beginning guitar is just like work on memorizing this as much as you can. And then even if you can't memorize all of them, if you know that the 3rd fret of E is a G, okay, then the 4th fret must be a G sharp. Like you might not have all of them off the top of your head. I'm gonna use my electric guitar as an example. So most electric guitars, they'll have dots on the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and then 2 dots on the 12th fret. That's just to make it easier to know where you are. If you can like remember what's on the 3rd fret, remember G, C, F, A sharp, D, G, and you remember those notes, well then you can figure out what the other ones are. And just practice. It's gonna suck in the beginning. You're gonna go through an awkward phase. You're gonna have to break in your fingers. You're gonna have to form calluses, and it's gonna suck. It's gonna hurt. But no pain, no gain, So if you liked this video, please give it a like. I am a very small channel. I have fewer than 200 subscribers. Share it with someone who wants to learn guitar. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them. I don't get many comments, so I'm sure I'll be able to answer them. And I'll try to make more teaching videos like this because I really do love talking about music theory and music and explaining it. I'm a teacher. This is what I do. But yeah, stay tuned for more music lessons. And I also write original songs, so you can check those out elsewhere on my channel. Keep learning, keep growing, be a dynamic character. I've been switching the blue that I've been using. This one looks like it's dark blue, but this is the dark blue. It is it's not dark blue. But as far as chords go, I really just that's how you play. Ring finger goes on the 2nd fret of E, and no, middle finger goes on the 2nd fret of E. So a C major is C, G, no. But you'll start with a G, no. You'll start with a D, pointer on the 2nd fret of B, no. Pointer on the 2nd fret of A, making a B. Then your pointer finger just moves over 1 string from the 2nd fret of D to the 2nd fret of G. I didn't move my finger right, but... Oh, that's such a pretty chord. Nothing really matters to me.